I'm in northern Berlin at the moment,
He's
and
just taking a break from Berghain. Then he's going back to the club in a couple of minutes, probably. The only man walk is still going. You know, they got all that.
You have to come out of the dark room for this.
He should be talking about his conscious state right now.
Welcome to Cloud Realities, an original podcast from Capgemini. And this week, a conversation show about the gap between humanity and AI. I'm Dave Chapman.
I'm Esmee and Rob.
and I'm Rob Kernahan.
And I'm delighted to say that joining us for today's show, and let's call it an Easter special, shall we? Should we call it an Easter special?
Easter special. Are there any eggs involved, Dave? I'm only happy about Easter. You know the whole theme of Easter, take all that, push it. I'm just happy in the chocolate eggs.
Yeah.
Do you do an egg hunt, Rob, or do you...
Oh, I don't have that much energy, Dave. Easy. I might watch others do it, but, you know, I think the days have passed where I get excited about an egg hunt. I just like it to be handed to me.
Did you say excited?
Oh, excited. I missed out there, didn't I?
Ez, do you like an Easter egg hunt, or do you like your chocolate delivered to you like Robert?
The result. Chocolate. Lots of chocolate, yeah.
I'm old enough and mature enough to know the result is the experience I'm actually seeking.
Just skip to the end.
Yeah, skip to the end part. That's the bit I'm really interested in.
Well,
look, the bottom line up front first. That's what I'm after.
To talk about elevated topics like this, I'm really, really glad to say that we have Anders Indset with us today. He's returning to the show. Very delighted about it. One of our most talked about episodes was when Anders previously joined us to talk about the simulation hypothesis. So I'm delighted to say he's joined us again today. Anders is a philosopher and author of books like Ex Machina, The God Experiment, and most recently, and I think just about to come out, The Singularity Paradox, the gap between humanity and AI. Anders, lovely to see you. How are you today?
Thank you so much. Great to be with you. Wonderful to be back on your show.
Now, do you enjoy the egg hunt or just the pure consumption of the egg?
Have the cake and eat it too. We have to figure out how to kind of sort of have all eggs all the time, right? No, it's a wonderful experience. The kids love it. I've spent many years digging those Easter eggs down into the snow of Norway and hiding them at 5 o'clock in the morning at the cabin. So I love it. Great experience.
Beautiful.
I mean, you lost me there at 5 o'clock in the morning, outside in the dark, digging holes in the snow and burying eggs. Anything that involves effort,
you lost me at effort.
You have children that based on that ritual, and you have to get up before them. You have to figure out how to get out. You have to hide it. You have to make all the maps of where to find it. And when they get up, and if they wake up early and excited, you have to be up earlier. So it was a big part of my dad chores to do that, and it has always been a special place in our culture in my family. So that always been a big part, with huge Easter eggs digged into some kind of snow holes or whatever. So that, yeah.
Did you ever get Easter eggs that were never found, and then the snow melts, and then there's these really depressed looking eggs just sat on the road or something?
I wouldn't have survived that part of the week at the cabin if my daughters wouldn't have found the eggs, and literally they carried a lot of chocolate, so I was interested in finding them myself, right? So
yeah. Well, who doesn't like chocolate? Anyway, so Robert, what's confusing you this week?
So I was reviewing some of our episodes, putting a security playlist together, Dave, on Spotify. You can check it out. And I was re-listening to a few of the parts. You know the AI episodes we did where the AIs led the show for a bit?
Yeah.
It played a clip, and it was about hackers starting to create saleable products for you to be able to go and hack. So they were creating a business model behind hacking, and they had calculations about who to hack and all that sort of stuff. That got me into they're building assets and products, basically. So they're getting into that commercialized world of hacking. And I wondered, do they actually have to tackle legacy, right? And do they have to maintain this now so that they can keep to sell it? Or do they just throw it away and start again? And how are they actually operating? And are all the fallacies that hurt you when you have to deal with IT affecting them? Or is it something different? Because it came from chaos and like people on a keyboard banging away. And over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen it commercialized. Yeah. And I'm wondering if all the things that come with commercialization have kicked in or not. So probably I was confused about it. So are they actually having meetings about, oh no, we need to patch upgrade that and put that new version in there and all this sort of stuff? I mean, very mundane calls about this type of thing.
I mean, I'm going to play the yes card on that, because if you're in a situation where you are, creating a product, irrespective of whether that product's dark web dark web product or normal internet, then you've got cost of development.
Yeah.
You've got cost of release, cost of maintenance, all of that sort of stuff. So you might be less concerned about, say, operational stability in a traditional sense, but you might be concerned about, like, efficacy of the actual virus working, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that the customer satisfaction that you were able to hack most effectively with my product. I'm the best on the dark web, so you want to buy from me. You're actually doing. I wonder if you do user research around it and go out and get feedback from the users, and you have a product backlog that develops things. I don't know, but it just thought to me. They've created a commercial model around it, so all the reality of having that type of world must have kicked in, and I wonder if that's a very frustrating thing, because they're probably not in it for that. But who knows?
Well, on that note, Ez, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm a bit puzzled. I think it's the same. You see a lot of people and generations go back to like phones without, the capability of going to internet. So maybe just the fun of hacking, maybe it's a niche market, to be honest, but there still will be a group, I think, that, will continue to use this and do this.
But isn't this a temporary problem, though? I mean, I think this is when you put algorithms to optimize, they will do this. And if you I'm looking at post-quantum safe cryptographies. The only path forward is to figure out how to tackle these challenges by applying mechanisms where humans have incentives not to do it. I mean, it was a very benign, very, very, very simple thought around this. If the developers of technologies would become responsible for their products in terms of an insurance, you would have insane insurance policies. And therefore, their interest of them would be to tackle these challenges. And on the other hand, if the incentive is for people to have insurances to tackle this, you get kind of the dynamism of creating products that are built into some kind of regulation. Because the scenario, Rob, that you talk about it's a problem right now, but once the AI and that enhances, it's just something that we will not even figure out. So we need to figure out some kind of control mechanism to avoid this. Is it on-chain premises, validation on point? Is it some kind of quantum state of security? Is it some kind of regulation part? We have to figure this out, because I think your confusion, if you think through it, I'm just playing with it, it's going to skyrocket into some kind of very, very powerful force.
Yeah.
Anders, can you come back every week and help us out with
it'd be nice.
That was quite useful. Someone actually has to answer the question.
Or maybe just run therapy sessions so that I can come with the confusions and you help me walk through it. Like, you solved it again.
You should do a new podcast. That's one of those.
All right, then. Let's get on with the show for today. For the benefit of the listeners that kind of haven't engaged with your work, particularly Ex Machina and the Singularity Paradox, just set it out a little bit for us, and if there's a through line between the books, clue us in a bit.
Yeah, sure, Dave. Well, I mean, my background obviously comes from business, and my fascination for technology has been the driving force forever. I see the economy kind of sort of as the operating system of society. So when I started to play with this, I wrote a book back in 2019, and I'm in the midst of rewriting this book now, titled The Quantum Economy. And that was exactly that topic of playing with quantum and the economy. What do you mean? And I saw that massive transition from the old economy and the new economy, where both were paradigms where we tamed technology to our advantage. And then we started to hand over the authorities to algorithms. And the emergence of AI and now the transition to quantum, basically AI on steroids, is basically letting go of that authority. And it's a completely new way of looking at how to build our operating system. So I was very interested in that. And it wasn't until I challenged my quantum physicist colleagues at one of these quintessential bars in Vienna, a night out, 12 of them, some hanging on to the Copenhagen interpretation and having the observer, and others leaning more towards the multi-world interpretation. So you have 12 employees of one company working together to build stuff. but have fundamentally different understanding of what quantum physics is telling us. So it's a wonderful experience to play with.
Although that idea of some people, 12 people in the same company with completely different ideas sounds like the team on any modern digital transformation program, doesn't it, really? I mean, let's be honest with that. It's the difference of views that...
I don't want to go there because it all starts with the term digital transformation. What the hell are we transforming into?
Yeah.
There is no common denominators to what this transformation is about. It's about, but it's good for making money. But let's get back to that. But get back to that. So I challenged them and I said, can you prove to me that we are not living in a simulation? Which seems like a task that could be achieved through quantum physics or math. And then Florian Neukert, my now co-author of these 2 latest books and some papers, calls me up after 3-4 months and says, Anders, I haven't slept in 4 months. It's just, I can't figure this out. So, okay, let's play with it. So we published a paper, Are We Living in a Simulation? Where we look at the simulation hypothesis of Nick Bostrom, and we take on that. And that's the Ex Machina book. And that is basically where we look at also how this transitions into the, I would say, the theological creationism of mankind, the creator, into a humane creationalism, where we are basically building a super digital entity, call it a god, where we want to have bliss, immortality, and divinity out of the machine. And we are handing that over. And how is that journey?
That's what I feel like every day when I'm using PowerPoint, Anders.
Yeah, well, that's...
Dave, you've used a few words there that are incorrect. You can't use PowerPoint. You have to get others to use it for you. Let's be honest about
That's my preferred route, Rob. I'm not going to lie.
How many times have I got called going, how do you make that happen in PowerPoint?
How do you make it bold again?
And it's good with the name Power, though. I've been Power.
You feel like you've got something there, haven't you? Yeah.
It signifies something, I think. Anyway, back to Ex Machina.
Transition to Ex Machina. We can dig into the book, but your question was more along the lines of is there a kind of sort of evolution of the thinking here, and they're related, very much so, because at the end of the day, it's about our perception of reality and consciousness, and what are we, and what are we up to, and what will remain of us, so to speak. So we published that book because we saw that the paper wasn't enough. We liked it and we played with it, so we made it into a book. And while doing so, we were writing on the now new book, The Singularity Paradox, Bridging the Gap Between Humanity and AI, where we look at, we are trying to build these machines, robots, AIs, as a machine, as an external entity. And we think that this might have some very, very, even I would say, existential risks. And however you want to define AGI and the depth of these technologies, we don't see that as a very smart decision, because we don't get the consequences. And we see that today. We have almost every week there is a breakthrough in new ways of looking at it and progressing, but we don't really get what's going on at the foundational level. So we said that, okay, maybe the plausible path then is not to merge or to create it externally, but to take evolution into our own hands and hack biology and chemistry and create what we have claimed artificial human intelligence, where the entrance point, or the starting point better, is the mensch, the human being, and we build from there. So, I mean, I'm not going to romanticize, but it's very, I get a good feeling to say that there is something that makes us human that is beyond software and code and programming and machinery. Yeah. And if that is something that we want to keep, we should keep that from the base criteria, the foundational level, and then we can evolve from that. So our argument is basically saying that we will figure out, the chemical scum, as Stephen Hawking called it, our body, and we will hack chemistry and biology. And from there on, if you want to remain mensch, human being, something that is a entity that has a self-perception and has the potentiality to ask a question that no one has answered, quote unquote, there is potential for progress and someone to experience that progress, I think that's a wonderful world to be in. And therefore, we started this journey of the Singularity Paradox. And that was the book that we now are bringing up.
So it sounds like, and without spoilers for the book perhaps, that in the argument that's kind of raging at the moment around AI, you have you have many different camps, but let's just take two different camps because I think they're at other ends of the spectrum. You have one camp that's, kind of perhaps seeing AI as this existential element, or that it's, kind of, we don't understand it and there are some dangers and difficulty in what AI might become, and that it might become this, kind of general intelligence. And then you've got some people at the other end who are just like, well, it's just like RPA, isn't it? It's like new robots in factories, but for white collar. What do you make of that dialogue that's going on in society at the moment? Are we overamping what's actually possible with AI today and maybe overreacting to it because we've taken on a lot of sci-fi ideas over the years? Or actually, is there really something in it, do you think?
Yeah, I think the latter. And I have I have an issue, obviously, with the term general intelligence. I mean, there is a term that there are multiple ways to define it. And all of these leading thinkers have various ways to look at it. I think Daniel Hassabis of Google DeepMind, he had this, this human view of it, where you put all the humans into a data center and you have these geniuses come together and work, right? He was like, that's kind of sort of the human cognitive capabilities that they are, of the brightest minds put into one data center. And if you look at that, I mean, the recent updates of Gemini and Grok and OpenAI, and looking at what's probably going on in China underneath the surface, I think, the speed of change, if you look at how we went from a GPT-3 in 2020 to GPT-4 in 2023, like we were talking years. Now we're basically talking weeks.
You can see that in the modes. So you can now, when you'd asked it to generate an image on the early DALL-Es, they weren't very good, couldn't get text right. Now with the new Gemini models, it'll do text perfectly. You can type it all in, and then you can stand back and ask it to edit the image. So say, no, I want that in that person's hand and this sort of stuff. So the capability, and because in the early days you'd get a different image every time you iterated as well, whereas now you can keep the same one. So there's this sophistication that is quite dramatic, and it's only 6 months.
Yeah, and you
go, the way you've had to engineer that behind the scenes to make that work must have been incredible if you think about the feat that's gone on in such a short space of time.
Yeah, and therefore I think, I made a very provocative statement some years ago, 5 years ago. I said that the Nobel lecturers of the future will come out of corporate labs, not out of academia. And it offended a lot of people, I think, but it was meant to do. It was this basic reasoning of how things evolve. And you see that the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry and Physics both were awarded to engineers and a tight link to Google. So I think we're heading there. And why do we have this progress? Because the brightest minds are not applying for some research project through a governmental project or long-term bureaucratic structures. They're in the corporate environments with almost infinite access to money and brain power, with the smartest, brightest minds just door to door. And therefore, you have an insane speed of things. Because if it doesn't work out, you don't need to have to publish something and get credibility. You're working on, you're basically doing surgery on an open heart, right? You're in the midst of tweaking and doing things.
It's that bit about the operating system that you describe. Yeah. The operating system is allowing that to happen.
Yes.
And commercial advantage is the thing that people are seeking, and therefore they're moving at pace with huge funding.
Exactly.
It's that thing about, do we need to rebalance the operating model slightly? Because sometimes the capitalist nature of organizations might run too fast, and we might create something we didn't realize what we were going to do, etc. But once the genie's out of the bottle, that's it, it's gone. So there's this bit about, I'll go back to what you said, I really like the way you described that, and it feels like maybe we need to observe the operating model a bit to understand the outcomes that it's creating, to see where we're actually going to end up.
Yeah, I mean, who is we in that play? I mean, do you want to miss out on a winner-take-all market? That's, I mean, just a couple of months ago or a year ago, we were saying, don't hook this thing up to internet. Don't have instant access to AI. I mean, now the borders are down, the regulation is down, security, everything is just, it's mayhem. It's just basically real-time analysis. If you go to X or whatever, you see every prompt underneath the post. Please check this against the Tropic, Grok, ChatGPT. I mean, people are not commenting based on their own beliefs. They are just checking it against the AI, and it's real time. So, yeah, from that perspective, it's very powerful, economically speaking, even though you cannot anticipate all the business model coming out of them. But if you look at how it's been built, you look at creating world models where you have definitions of physics and structures that you can relate to that interact with an LLM. But you also see these world models doing more abstract things and making predictions. And the whole essence of now the reasoning models just being the main core of the new updates, where you have symbolic reasoning and you have the knowledge graphs and you have all these tied to the LLM tools. So you outsource to some math genius or physics genius, and you come back and you question, you see the reasoning and you see how these agents or models interact. It's kind of it gives you a feeling of, this is beyond anything that I could do and my peers and my colleagues could do. There are obviously things that are, this week I had a setup in chess where I got to a position that was not something that OpenAI could not analyze. And it was just coming up with all these crazy ideas, and I had to correct it, and I was just playing with, how to get out of it. And you see that this is something that no human being that has any understanding of a chessboard would come to a so stupid conclusion. So there are things that gives you hope, but on the other hand, it's insanely powerful, and the speed. And I think that has a lot to do with that capital and the brain power coming in. So yeah, do we need to align? Do we need an upgrade to the capitalistic model? Do we need to look at values and regulations and ethics? Yes. But who are we? Coming back to your point.
Nefarious states won't apply to our new operating model. Exactly. Well, there's a thing, and just to go back to your point, I was in a conversation the other day with drug discovery, and the comment was, we're using AI and interfaces like you describe, and it's coming up with ideas for structures that we would have never have thought of. Mm-hmm. And so rather than 10, we're down to 2, and those 2 are dramatically more successful. So as simple as leading the human mind down a different path, and the point where it sends you is an extremely powerful thing, because you cut out so much waste. And you dramatically improve the quality. So that's a simple application of it now, which everybody's doing. It's just simply prompting the human to think slightly differently, like you say in the chess problem.
There's a couple of recent quotes by, I think they were ex-Google engineers, but they could have been OpenAI. I can't actually remember. One of the quotes was that we don't quite understand how it's getting to some of the conclusions that it's coming to, and that there is, some magical element to how it's kind of making some decisions or getting to some conclusions. And then, of course, there is the more famous Google engineer who sort of resigned and sort of publicly quoted as regretting his life's work in AI. I wonder if you've brought those 2 events together, Anders, and sort of what you make of the magic of it, for want of a better term.
Yeah, I think there is a very strong argument on a general note that we don't get it. I mean, and I say we, not because I'm not, an expert into that level in that field, but I think, humanity, any expert, any engineer does not get the full grasp on how these models now come to a particular result. And I think that's a fairly commonly understood way to look at it. I can take a classical example here that is many years old by now with AlphaZero, the chess engine, coming back to, the great Magnus Carlsen, my countryman from Norway, playing chess. And the engineers were looking at how AlphaZero trained against itself and played chess. And they didn't get how they came to those conclusions and how to play. And Magnus was one of the first to adopt to these models. And now every young chess player is plays more like a robot and a machine than it does like based on conventional theory. And Magnus played in the World Championship, and all of a sudden on the H row, he did a pawn move that was a losing move according to Stockfish, the supercomputer that he was created by humans and all the games that have ever been played. That's a stupid move based on conventional theory. But Magnus played in the World Championship, and 8-9 moves later down the line, he had an advantage. And everyone came back and said, well, he messed up, but he recovered. How did he do that? Right. And he was asked, what was that move that you did? That was that a mistake? And he said, well, no, that was an AlphaZero move. I said, well, what is that? And they said, I have no idea. It just wins. So,
I love it. I don't know why. I just know I'm going to win.
Yeah, and that is a very good analogy to where we are. I have no idea how it came to that conclusion. And coming back to your previous point on material design and the progress here, I predict. And I have a lot of thoughts behind this, but I don't need it because I just look at progress. Most likely, our periodic table will be enhanced by a bunch of new elements, moving from 118, 119 now to 130, maybe even 140, that will be discovered by algorithms. If we want to put that into also some kind of quantum computer kind of state that is, in midterm future, then you will have those that you can run in real time, all the simulation that would have taken years or decades to figure out. And you come out with all kinds of new vaccines and ways to do things in a different matter. And this type of progress is, to me, much more likely than stagnation. Because we think about barriers, we think about chip design, we think about energy restrictions, but it seems to continue. And this is an argument that I think David Deutsch, one of the geniuses of our time, put in his book, The Beginning of Infinity, that we have an almost infinite capability of progress. And that's what we're seeing right now, that this progress is speeding up. And coming back to my previous argument, the difference is now that we had a time where we could error correct. So we screwed up, we built technology, we strived towards progress, we pushed the borders, we made mistakes, and then we came back and error corrected. It seems now, though, that since we have handed this over to a lot of algorithmic tasks, that we need to figure out how to get it right the first time. Your argument, Dave, on slowing down or capitalism, I think it's a fundamental thing that we need some kind of upgrade to the capitalistic model, to a humane capitalism, where the question is not, is it possible? The question should be, should we do it? What kind of future is worth striving for? If everything is possible, if science and fictions or enlightenment and methodology and folklore literally merges.
And what do you make of? I think this is connected, but maybe coming at your point from a slightly different angle. One of the books I found quite influential when we first started to talk about AI on the show, for example, was have you read Tegmark's Life 3.0?
Yeah. And
his sort of thesis that we are Life 2.0, e.g., we can teach each other languages and we can repair certain elements of our bodies. But what we can't do yet is download our consciousness or everything that we know. We are we're finite as beings. And he was positing that 3.0 would be a silicon-based life form that, of course, can download everything that it knows. It can also take on different forms, and it could be a spacecraft, or it could be a car, or whatever, like a transformer. What's your take on that, like, evolutionary point around AI versus it's something that's exterior to us? Is it something that actually is going to follow us and be the version of the humans that go out into space, for example?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question that basically then goes into the realm of life Lebendigkeit. What does it mean to be alive and have a perception of it, which is coming into consciousness, and saying that, what does it mean, that to perceive something, this subjective experience. And I think that's very fundamental, at least in my world. It's like everything around me could be a simulation. And it's very, as we said in the Ex Machina, the only restriction, if you look at the math and the quantum physics, you look at the only thing that right now holds us back is entropy. So the argument is that if we could create one simulation of our universe with all the atoms in our observable universe. We could just, narrow down the focus. So where you look, like a computer game, you just render, and that wouldn't be very problematic based on the entropy in the universe. The challenge is if there is a simulation within a simulation ad infinitum. So there are 8 billion people creating simulations that create simulations in the simulation. Mm-hmm. If the base computer obeys the same physical laws, and there is no external intervention, God or creator or whatever, at one point, this machine would come to a halt. It could be a new Big Bang and a new recreation moment or whatever you want to look at. But that's the challenge that the entropy would then hold as a limiting factor. You can say, okay, can you play with entropy? Can you reverse? Can you reduce? There are papers and theories, and most conventional scientists would say that's not possible. But that's kind of sort of where we are on that. And what does that mean in regards to your question? It basically puts you in that topic of, are we a part of a simulation chain? Are we at all real? But what you cannot take away is the realness of the experience, to me, talking into a computer and have a subjective conscious experience of just that. And could we put that in a bottle or a rock or some kind of cosmic consciousness? That's a question that is now heavily debated with various looks at it. Don Hoffman takes an approach and says, consciousness is fundamental and physical reality evolves out of that. You have illusionists that say that consciousness, any consciousness is just an illusion. You have, the classical mind-body problem where they're not interconnected, and you have a challenge. There are views, you have panpsychists looking at the world, that everything has some kind of consciousness and that there is different layers of consciousness. And all of these are various views, but it's not, Max Tegmark's point is very plausible to that extent that, if it's a part of our physical world and we can get it, then obviously we can also, replicate it or upload it or download it. We don't need to be in this finite body. But again, you could also choose to have like nanotechnologies to replace cells, and you have all the longevity dreamers that you could basically.
Yeah, I think they should get a crack on with that. Actually, that technology would be really helpful, wouldn't it? And did you see, this is a bit of an aside to your point, the longevity point. Did you see the documentary on Netflix about that guy who's basically making his life a misery because he wants to add like 5 years on the end of his life? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Why? Well, what motivation drives you to that? Is it literally, I want 5 years existence, so I'm going to wreck X?
The 80 years running up to it are going to be awful, but I might get another couple on the end.
So my take is here, give me 10 more years between 30 and 50.
Yeah. That's the prime.
You're like Rob in Berkheim. Just give me the 10 years, laying in bed alone from 100 to 110. I don't need those, right?
No, you don't want those years. No.
Spend your whole life, not experience, is with optimizing for getting the...
getting the rubbish 10.
Yeah, get the rubbish 10. So no, but there are, I think the current numbers, I think this is something that I'm not an expert on, but I think that the current numbers that they communicate, at least, is that right now, they win 4 months in a year. So they have slowed down progress and the aging process. And they believe that within 3 to 5 years, they will get it down to a 0. It means you will stop aging.
Oh, you know what the worst part about that discovery is, for me, is it's arrived just a little bit too late. So I would have loved to have paused my life 25 years ago.
Let's put let's take two things. First of all, that's your limiting way of looking at it. Because if you could slow it down, why can't you reverse it? That's a same argument.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yes. Why don't you not see infrared? If you can hear better, why don't hear like whatever? That's something that you could look at, just downloads on your brain app to get enhanced qualities, right? So why shouldn't you be able to reverse it? That's one part. But the other part is, if you were to pick like one age where you would remain forever, what would that be?
28.
Oh, I know it's 28.
I was going to say
I thought about this.
Where is that?
28.
That was...
Yeah, 28. I thought about this the other day. It's like a recent conversation I had in my head.
Is that like a physical 28, or is it at you as you were at 28? With your life?
It was. You still had the bouncy flexibility of youth. Responsibility hadn't quite kicked in fully, and there was enough disposable income to have fun. And those are my three criteria. Or I say, actually, that's the age. So then, if you could extend me at that age, and I could increase disposable income, and do all the things that I wanted to do, then I think you're onto it.
Esmee, how did you get to 28?
It's still, you're not 30 yet, so you have the 30. That dilemma of what are the big decisions in life, and you're away from the struggle in your 20s. Am I good enough? Am I likable enough? The struggle.
Rob still thinks about those things.
Yeah,
I do. This is what goes through my mind when I'm bored, sat in a waiting room somewhere. Yeah.
And so, Anders, where did you get to? What was your age?
No, I have no idea, but I kind of like my age right now, and I think it is the beauty, and as I think Rob was aiming at, what we get into that existential question then. So, say when the youngest. And the classical existentialism of the 20th century to fear death and the finitude of life itself. If that is taken out of your life, what then will happen? There are many paths to this. Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, and followed up by Neil Postman with "We are amusing ourselves to death." This is kind of, there is nothing other than consumption and pleasures. And I've been playing with that in a new kind of existentialism that I call undead. So it would be kind of sort of the enhanced version of moving towards some kind of philosophical zombie state.
Right.
Where we're having the same conversation and the lights are on, but there are no one home to perceive them. Mm-hmm. So you have Narcissus in the Greek mythology. The beauty of this entity, this creature, is there, and it mirrors beautifully in the water, but there is no perceiver of that perception of that image. And that is kind of sort of my analogy to this undead state of reactionism, where we just consume and react, and there is no inner drive or passion or some kind of urgency to create.
I sort of feel like that on a Tuesday. That's my day when, the things are happening around me, but I'm not taking them in.
It plays to a really interesting point now. I mean, the whole conversation we've just had is, how should you live your life and what's the best way to do it? You've got the greater good argument. You've got the self-focusing argument. What's the bit where you're most happy and content? Because a lot of people sort of rage against the machine internally and such like. And I don't think we've ever worked it out. But then if you extended life indefinitely and could reverse it and say you could vary where you were on the age spectrum, your consciousness is still aging, even though your body might be moving about. Does that actually increase happiness or not?
No,
I don't know. If you could live forever, is that a real... would you become so utterly bored because you experienced everything? Would you then just sit and cogitate? I don't know. That was the thing about if you could go on.
So my take on this, we urge through life and search some kind of, purpose or some kind, and we strive for happiness. And I think, we chemically speaking, we can make ourselves happy. You just beam in something and have the feeling of happiness. You could do that technologically speaking, right? But from a natural, biological, evolutionary perspective, the purpose, we cannot make ourselves happy, but we can make ourselves unhappy, less unhappy, by detaching ourselves from things that are holding us back, dragging us down, whatever. And by thin slicing that, you put yourself in a position to be struck by something called happiness. So you have the experience of the happiness, and that's the magic. And the same goes for the purpose part. So the finitude of a purpose, I think that's, life is kind of sort of wonderful as it is, with its struggles and existential, fights and whatever. But it's kind of sort of like a wonderful journey to nowhere. And in that journey, you fill your life. So you consciously do something active in order to experience that action. And by experiencing that action, you give purpose to your life. So it's about filling your life in order to have a fulfilled life. So the less you are driven by reaction, you are driven from external factors. Are you liked? How many followers do you have? The next task, the Zoom meeting, whatever. The less you have an agency of your life. So you don't have action, you have reaction. The reaction makes you tired, worn out, depressive, and you feel the overwhelming weight on your shoulders. But if you have an intrinsic motivation and you fill life with an activation, then you have a fulfilled life. And I think this is one of the big existential threats that we have with technology today. If we can have everything, what remains of the Lebendigkeit, a wonderful German word, the liveliness of life itself, where you experience the wonders of life, as in comparison to just live it. And I think that is the whole, to me, my existentialist thinking towards how to avoid the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. But but technology is just this point. Technology is driving a world that pokes us a lot, so we lose agency rather than gain it, like you say. So, are we in the driving seat, or are we being driven? Is like the thing, and I think it's hard for many to get over to that. I'm going to be the proactive nature and drive out and be in control, etc. But it's a very good point. Is where happiness comes from, but how society affects that, because we're in that system whether we like it or not. So we have to adapt to it.
Skew us a second back towards the AI aspect of this, and just talk about AGI, and just for the sake of definition, artificial general intelligence is like post singularity. This, a sort of self-aware AI. Anders, we've pondered this on the show before, but I'm sure you have a good take on this. I'd love to hear it, which is, do you think we will realize when AGI happens? So, is it something where, a scientist is intentionally trying to create AGI, or does AGI happen out with the control of the human?
Yeah, I mean, as I said in the beginning, the term AGI is the challenging part here. So one could almost argue that we have AGI today, because a lot of the cognitive things that we have. So is it a year away? Is it 3 years away? Whatever. With the current speed of things, most cognitive tasks performed by human beings, if now put into a humanoid robot of the mechanisms that we have seen being created, I think, these comparisons are sooner than later. If we look at AGI as a definition of some kind of self-awareness in the machine, that's a completely different way of looking at it. But to ponder your question on the realization of AGI, so if we take as an analogy, if you rebuild the human brain neuron by neuron, and we see neuron as a binary 0 and 1 firing neuron, 83 billion neurons in our brain. If we see that and we start to rewire that and hook it up to some kind of AI, you figure out 1,000 neurons and you figure out how 10,000 neurons are interlinked, and you have 100,000, a million, 100 million, a billion. Is there a point in the brain where the conscious experience get lost? So you transition into a cloud brain and you have infinite access to free knowledge. You know everything, all your memories, everything is there, and it's put onto a cloud and it's saved down, and you download your thoughts. Is there a perception of this thought came from the cloud, or it came from, quote unquote, somewhere within? What kind of sparked the magic of the arising of a thought? And this is kind of sort of a feeling of saying, coming back to my lights are on, but no one home to perceive them. Can we build a Dave that is 100% identical, atom by atom, and he has a brain and everything is a duplicate and he has everything, indistinguishable.
The jokes are writing themselves, aren't they?
You've just written a brilliant joke about it's not a replica of Dave if there's a functioning brain in him, all right? I think, well, let's get that straight off. I mean, I could see there was too many jokes were filling my head as you were talking there.
Yeah, but you put 5 of it in the room and we were all going to laugh at their own jokes, 5
Daves. Hey, so how do you entertain a Dave? Stick him in a room with 4 more Daves. What a brilliant idea.
What a night it would be.
Oh, man. How many old fashions?
But it doesn't matter because there's no one there to perceive it, right? So you have a lot of laughter without experience. No, but I think that's the challenge here. What is it to see? Is it already too late? Is the power, the genie is out of the bottle? Is the power of this capitalistic drive towards AGI so strong that we are on some kind of path towards obsolescency for the human? So we have the emergence of Homo obsoletus that is not needed for any particular task whatsoever. Are we already there, or are we, seeing the wonderful birth of some kind of access to a new states of consciousness or some kind of super intelligence that will take care of all the challenges we have with ideologies and climate and poverty and diseases and everything. So it's something that is so extremely rapid. And I think everyone that is an expert or a self-proclaimed expert of this field has to be at least open to seeing this insane speed over the past weeks and months, and then go back and say, where are the limits here? Are there any? If you're a fiction writer today and you want to write a movie that takes 3 years to produce, and you want to bring it out as a Hollywood blockbuster in 3 years, what the hell do you script?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, indeed. And so, but to turn that on its head, what will entertainment become, right? So 3-year process. I can perceive a day where you have a chat with your TV and say, I want 10 hours of this type of thing. I'm interested in this. You describe what you like, and then it goes and generates you a personalized experience.
Literally the Black Mirror episode, isn't it?
Yeah, and then it plays it back, right? And that idea of it's all totally configured and curated for me means that concept of building a piece of art and everybody experiences the art. What happens to that? I always see expression in the way I want to receive it, as opposed to somebody else's version of expression. And I wonder about that in the future. About, will it be so overly customized we'll never see the beauty of others?
But is this dystopia or utopia? Because
no, exactly. It's Wall-E, isn't it? It's like becoming this. We're stuck in the system.
But isn't that the magic, Rob? Isn't it? If you were to go to a stand-up comedy show and outline what kind of jokes they were supposed to tell you, right? And this is the funny thing about this is that if you go to your YouTube wall right now and you look at the videos, you find probably 10 of them that you find interesting.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't, if you were to prompt that and say, what do you want to look at? You would never come to that idea. So you're not at all capable of describing what you want to have, right? And that is, if you try to describe what you like, the magic is not in that. The magic is found in the experience progress of what you didn't know that you liked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that is like one of the wonders of life. What catches you off guard. It's one of those beautiful sceneries of the human mind to say, okay, when you stand in front of the mirror and you smile without no one watching, and you experience that, that's not where did that come from? What is that? That's the magic. And I think that holds to be true for a lot of fields where you are surprised that you enjoyed it. You are surprised of that laughter. It catches you off guard. And if you were to describe that yourself, then I think it becomes mechanical, and then it becomes into that state of self-optimization. And it's a kind of sort of like a reinforcement learning algorithm. You just optimize your own behavior based on your own criteria. And that's, I think, is the state of being undead.
Well, look, I want to bring today's conversation to a bit of a conclusion, but for the first time, also have a bit of a cliffhanger. It's like a cliffhanger episode because...
Easy, Dave.
This is exciting. But I'm glad to say
is this a new experience?
Yeah,
it is a new experience for the podcast, isn't it? Yeah, this is something new.
It's a cliffhanger. It's the first time we've done one. And Anders, I'm glad to say, is hopefully going to join us again for the Christmas episode this year. So by way of setting that up, Anders, I want to bring a couple of threads together. I know you've been looking at quantum and AI and how those two things come together, but I wonder if you can frame that by giving us some thoughts on whether this accelerated rate of technology, quantum intersecting with AI at some point in probably the very near future, does that make the chances of us living in a simulation more likely?
I would lean towards the latter. And if quantum computing with 1 million qubits stabilized, just take a number, is in foreseeable future possible, then progress is so rapid that it's not to rule out that we can simulate these experiences that we have. That's something that I lean towards today.
Ez, what you been thinking about?
Well, at least we're not there yet, huh? So we're still struggling in the mud in reality. So let's take it from there. Talking about experiences in teams, this week I hosted several workshops around team behavior and dynamics. And one question that keeps coming up is, who do we see as future leaders in our team? So also about being prepared for the future. And just as often, I noticed the team was quickly pointing out the loudest voice. The most confident one, the one that was really, up and taking it naturally, but quite dominant. But it made me pause and think about the work of John Maxwell, who says you have to learn to follow before you can actually be a good leader. So he argues that true leadership begins with followerships, with people who take responsibility without needing the spotlight, who serve the team's purpose, ask great questions, lead themselves before they lead others, and think of that quiet colleague who always lifts others up, or the team member who constantly shows up, listens, and grows. So especially now in this area of life where we're at, with the speed of life, what would it mean to be a good follower today, to become that great leader in the future? What's your thoughts on that?
I personal reflection on that. I definitely, when I was like younger and I had aspirations of
28, Dave, when you were 28.
Maybe even pre that, to be honest with you.
Oh, right, okay.
Quite
not aware of the world yet. Not aware of the world. Yeah.
This is horrific, naive honesty I'm about to put on the table. But yeah, I definitely had that notion of, to be a leader was you had to be the person at the front of the room or the front of the peloton, charging forward like an everybody follow me sort of thing. And I used to, sort of, aspire to be that and then work quite hard to be that. And it probably took me 20 years to realize, one, that's not even necessarily the best form of leadership, but also like the contribution you can bring to a situation, you can do that from the back. So I think for me that I spent, a lot of my professional life sort of thinking about that question. And I sort of, I'm all in on if you don't understand what followership is and how that works and how powerful that can be, yeah, you're only going to be a one-dimensional leader, I think, without that.
Yeah, and I think also still, are we good followers still? It's not that you stop following when you're a leader.
Yeah,
especially if you're in a company that has other leaders above you. Are you taking their back? Are we still cheering them on? With so many people in companies that have opinions about their leaders, they almost dehumanize them. Like they have to be perfect because every mistake they make, there's so much attention to the mistakes they make instead of, it must be tough to be in that position, to have those broad shoulders that take on everything. From a leadership perspective.
I think there's a bit there about how you're perceived as well as a leader makes a massive impact on whether or not you're effective. Yeah. And I think if you haven't sat and perceived other leaders around you and understood what that means to the impact to the people that they have leadership over, then you're probably not be as self-aware as you need to be. So it's about gaining the experience.
Use the word ownership there, Rob.
Well, no, I was just trying to. Dave, it's early in the morning. My brain isn't quite functioning correctly. This is where the AI should have told me what to say, sat next to me. But the whole thing about if I haven't experienced it, and been part of it, how can I ever know what does good look like? Yeah. So if you just get thrust into it, you've never seen a good leader, bad leader. We've all seen good leaders, we've all seen bad leaders. So when we get to that position, does that help us behave differently? And I suppose that's a big part of it as well, isn't it? Being part of the experience means that you might discharge the experience better.
But yeah, and I think, this is one of these interesting aspects when it comes to leadership, that even though if you have understood the theory behind it, some people just seem to get it.
Yeah.
It's like something that they do it, and the doing part is very interesting, because you could do the same thing with a different result, basically, right? And that's some of this human magic. And I remember, this is also many years ago, I came up with what I call the H revolution, because it was an HR conference, and I said, if we look at human as resources that we are to control and dominate, that will be technological. So I played with these 4 new definitions of the R in HR. So one was human reasoning. So if you are able to reason today, enhanced by AI and knowledge, obviously, but the reasoning part, the understanding part, becomes crucial. So if the person that can reason in the room is often listened to. The other part is a rhetoric. So the ethos, pathos, logos, how you bring things across when you speak, how you speak, that is something that we relate to, how we communicate. The third part I came up with was recognition. So if you recognize the other people in the room and you uplift them, and you become that person that can sit at the back, but you recognize what they do. And the fourth part is obviously the relationing part here, that you have human relations. And I think moving on, that, the foundational level of kindergarten education, executive education, all the way, should be about those components. We need a society of understanding. We don't need experts and knowledge workers that dominate. We need people that are capable of reasoning. We need people that recognizes more than empathy. The recognition is the important part. You don't have to feel anything. You just have to recognize it. Kind of like a robot, If I recognize that you're having a bad day, I don't have to feel anything. I just have to say the right things and recognize you.
Oh, I want to challenge you on that, Andy.
Yes, please.
Because I've seen quite some booklets given to leaders, because the feedback of employees were, not very empathetic. So let's give them some examples in a PowerPoint. And then if you have this situation, please say this, and then you're all good. We all know that I hear what you're saying. You're saying the correct words, but I'm not feeling you. And for me, that's even worse than not saying the right words.
Yeah, I get that. But this is a book that could be read on the topic from Paul Bloom. It's called Against Empathy. And he argues for rational compassion. And this is something that I've experienced myself. I've spoken in front of thousands of people. You're exhausted. You played with your mind. You've done a lot of work, and you've been there on stage, and you try to have an interaction with all the people in the room, like literally being present. And people come up to you and say, well, I feel you. I feel your energy. You're so empathic. And I'm saying, nothing going on. It's just, I'm just an AI at that moment. But I am capable of recognizing this person. I'm aware. And I'm capable of the rhetoric and communicating. And this had made me think that this is why I have and I like your challenge, because it's exactly what I get all the time. And I don't have the answer of it. I just have the experience, and I see it all the time. And I recognize people that are, you could call it manipulation, even though it might not be conscious manipulation, but I see people that are really good at making other people think that they feel a lot. And this is why I have a challenge with the whole human skill part in AI. Can a robot be empathic? And I think if it's really good at rational compassion, it's kind of sort of, if a robot makes you have goosebumps, you cannot goose it away. And that's the level that we're at. So I like your challenge here, but it's also provocative, because it spins out a lot of what technology is capable of doing. But these are first-hand experience that I have had, where I honestly afterwards can say, I didn't feel anything. And this person who who has had the traumatized and done all the psychology and is an expert on esoteric and spiritualism and feelings and emotions. This person feels me and feel my empathy. Like, what's going on here? And so I'm not judging on this. I'm just throwing out observations that I want to play with. And Bloom, with his Against Empathy, made me think about this. And it's a very interesting topic. Yeah.
Well, look, on that note, let's leave it for today with a big thank you to Anders. Always great to see you, man. Thank you so much for spending time with us this morning.
Thank you for having me, guys. Great. It was a wonderful conversation.
It was indeed wonderful. Now, we end every episode of this podcast by asking our guest what they're excited about doing next. That could be something in your personal life, or it could be something in your professional life, or maybe a bit of both. So, Anders, what are you excited about doing next?
Yeah, right now I'm off to speak at a conference here in Austria and address leaders. So I want to talk about values in Europe and the future of Europe. So I'm excited about that. On an intellectual level, I'm playing with my triangular alchemy, also writing a lot at the moment. And I'm very excited about that because I think we need to change how we look at organizations to find that quote unquote purpose for the human being in the companies and how they're going to survive in this very rapid technological era. So those things are great excitement.
Very cool.
We are on Easter holiday next week, but the show will be back on May 1st. If you would like to discuss any of the issues on this week's show and how they might impact you and your business, please get in touch with us at cloudrealities@capgemini.com. We're all on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to connect and DM if you have questions for the show to tackle. And of course, please rate and subscribe to our podcast. It really helps us improve the show. A huge thanks to Anders, our sound and editing wizards Ben and Louis, our producer Marcel, and of course to all our listeners. See you in another reality soon.